This story is titled, Sister-in-Law Banned Me from the Family Photo on the Trip I Paid For. So I left her with unpaid bills. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to take my wife, Sarah, her parents, and her younger sister, Amy, on a family vacation to Cabo San Lucas. Now, Sarah and I have been married for 10 years, and we've done well for ourselves. No kids, good jobs, and we love to travel. We usually plan a few nice vacations every year, just us, but recently we started bringing her parents along for one of them. Her dad's health hasn't been great, and he'd been saying he wanted to see Cabo again. Apparently, it's where they honeymooned like 40-something years ago. Anyway, he offered to pitch in for the trip, but I didn't mind covering it. I figured I'd already be paying for myself and Sarah, so adding 2 more wasn't going to hurt. And her parents have always treated me well, so it's kind of like my way of giving back. You know, everything seemed lined up to be. Then came Amy. Amy's in her early 30s, single mom of 3, and definitely doesn't have the kind of money for a vacation like this. Every time we came back from one, she'd get this look like she was kind of sad she couldn't do something like it. So, when Sarah mentioned it to her, Amy came out and asked if she could tag along this time. I thought about it for a second, but yeah, I said okay. Figured it'd be nice to do something for her too, and maybe it'd make her feel included. Booked her flight, reserved the rooms, handled everything. I was already covering the cost for 4, so what's one more, right? We get there, and that's where things start going sideways. First day, we arrive at this beach resort. Beautiful place right on the water. We're all settling in, and I get this idea to take a family photo. It's kind of my thing, always getting the arrival picture to remember the start of every trip. So, I'm getting everyone together, and as I'm setting up the shot, Amy looks at me and goes, "Oh, can you take the picture for us? We just want one with the 4 of us." At first, I was like, wait, what? I thought maybe I'd misheard, but no, she was dead serious. She wanted just her parents, and Sarah. I mean, I'd expected her to maybe want a few photos with just them, you know, the original family thing. But to ask me right off the bat, and in that tone, I didn't want to make a scene or anything, so I just took the picture and shrugged it off. Figured it'd be a one-off thing. Yeah, turns out I was wrong. It was like every chance she got. Amy was making sure I was on the other side of the camera. We'd be at some beautiful spot, looking out at the ocean or doing something cool, and she'd go, "Oh, let's hit a family picture." And every single time, guess who was holding the camera? Mister, it wasn't even subtle. She'd say things like, "Just us 4 for this one," or "This is just for family," which, if I'm not mistaken, should probably include me, right? I've been married to Sarah for a decade now. Sarah would try to include me, though. She'd say, "Why don't we all take one together?" And her parents would chime in and try to pull me into the shot, too. But Amy was relentless. She'd go, no, let's just do one without him first. And by the time they finished the first photo, they'd be ready to move on. Or she'd somehow manage to sideline me altogether. It's not like I was there just for the photos. But you start noticing when every memory doesn't include you. Amy was posting on social media, too. Every time I checked, she was uploading photos where it looked like she and her family had come to Cabo, and I was just some guy holding the camera in the background. If someone were to scroll through her pictures, they'd probably think I wasn't even there. It's a weird feeling, being the invisible one on your own vacation, especially one you paid for. I don't want to sound petty, but after the 10th time, it started getting to me. Then we hit dinner. We went to this pretty nice restaurant I'd booked ahead of time, one of those places with a view of the sunset. I thought, finally, this would be a moment to relax. So we're getting seated, and I'm thinking Sarah and I will sit together with her parents across from us. But nope, Amy slides right in next to Sarah, leaving me with her parents on one side and a service station on the other. I couldn't even see the view. I tried to join in on the conversation, but Amy kept steering it back to old family stories, things that didn't involve me. She'd go on about childhood trips, stuff from before I even knew Sarah. Sarah and her parents would try to include me, give me context, but it felt forced. Amy would keep changing the topic, like I was some outsider. By the end of dinner, I was practically sitting there in silence while they all laughed over stories I'd never been a part of. It felt like I was just tagging along on someone else's family trip. And that was just day one. All right, so after that whole thing at dinner on the first day, I was hoping things would get better. I mean, I thought maybe Amy was just excited to be with her family and that it would settle down, but it didn't. Honestly, it got worse. It's like every little thing she could do to push me aside, she went ahead and did it. So we're at this amazing resort in Cabo with all these activities planned, and Sarah and I booked a private beach cabana for everyone, just so we could relax and enjoy the day together. I thought it'd be a nice family thing, right? Well, wrong again. The first weird moment happened when we were hanging out by this beautiful infinity pool that overlooks the ocean. I've been looking forward to just floating around, unwinding a bit. But just as I'm about to jump in, Amy comes over and goes, "Oh, can you stay out for a second? We want to take a girls-only picture. Just me, Sarah, and Mom." So I'm thinking, okay, fine, whatever. It's one picture. But after they take that one, she doesn't even let me join in. She basically steers them from one photo op to the next, all with me just standing there watching them, like I'm some bystander who stumbled into their family photo shoot. I'm just standing around holding their stuff while they're posing and laughing like I'm not even there. Sarah did try to pull me in, at least, but Amy kept coming up with excuses. She'd be like, "Oh, let's just do one more without him for memories." Or, "This is just for the girls." And every time she got away with it, she'd give me this look like she knew exactly what she was doing. I started to feel like I was just a prop, the one who covered the bill and held the camera. So later that afternoon, I decided to go grab a quick drink at the bar, and I come back to find they'd all taken this group selfie without me. I wasn't gone more than 5 minutes, but they'd already snapped a pic and posted it. It was like every memory she was collecting on this trip. She went out of her way to make sure I wasn't in it. By the time we went to dinner that night, I'd already stopped checking her social media because, frankly, it was just annoying to see how she kept cropping me out of everything. Now, at dinner, I thought maybe we'd actually have a chance to just enjoy a meal together. Sarah and I even joked earlier that we'd make sure to sit together no matter what this time. But of course, as soon as we get to the table, Amy does this quick move where she slides right into the seat next to Sarah, and then she insists that her parents take the seats across so they could all enjoy the view. Guess where I ended up? Yep, at the edge, with my back to the view, squeezed between her parents and the kitchen entrance. It's hard to explain, but it was like every time I tried to jump into the conversation, Amy would somehow make it about something from their past, like a family trip to the lake or some random story from Sarah's high school days. You know, things that obviously didn't include me. And any time Sarah or her parents tried to include me or give context, Amy would just bulldoze right through, changing the subject to something else. By dessert, I was basically just sitting there, silently eating my food while they laughed and chatted around me. The next day, things only got worse. We decided to book a boat ride to do some sightseeing. It was this small boat that seated 5, so it was a bit cramped. I suggested that maybe we split up like Sarah's parents could sit together, and I'd sit with Sarah, leaving Amy on her own. But Amy, of course, suggested something else. She goes, "Oh, it'll be more balanced if you sit in the other row." Translation, sit alone, while she got to sit with Sarah and their parents. So there I was, separated from them yet again. And to make things even better, the tour guide was snapping pictures for everyone on board, and they bought one of those souvenir photos. And in the photo, there's me sitting off to the side while the family huddles together like a happy little group. It felt like I was just tagging along with someone else's family. I try to brush it off and not let it get to me, but come on. By the time we got back to the hotel, I was starting to feel more like a stranger than Sarah's husband. And honestly, I was confused about why Amy was acting like this. I mean, if she didn't want me around, Then why ask to come on this vacation that I planned and paid for? And then there was another dinner incident. We went to this seafood spot that's popular in Cabo, and it's the kind of place where you have to make reservations weeks in advance. I'd done that, booked the best table with a sunset view and everything. But when we get there, Amy practically races to take the best seat, leaving me again at the edge. This time, I'd had enough and tried to say something about it. Sarah even backed me up, saying she wanted to sit with me. But Amy goes, "Stop being so clingy. We're here to have a family vacation." The nerve, right? By the end of that dinner, I felt like the guy who came along to pick up the tab and take the pictures. Nothing more. And I could tell Sarah was frustrated too. But she kept saying maybe it was just Amy wanting family memories. At this point, I wasn't sure how much more I could take. All right, so by the third day, I was hanging on by a thread. I'm telling you, every little thing Amy did seemed like it was specifically designed to make me feel like the outsider on this trip. I tried to talk to Sarah about it, but she was still caught up in that. Maybe it's just Amy wanted to make family memories mindset. I get it, but there's only so much I could take, especially when it felt like Amy was going out of her way to push me out of everything. Then we get to this spa day we'd booked. Now I'd planned this whole thing out months in advance. Sarah and I had our own private suite. Her parents had theirs. And I'd even booked a solo room for Amy because honestly, I figured everyone could use a bit of relaxation time. Well, surprise, surprise. Amy had other plans. So we're all ready to head out. And then Sarah's dad mentions he's not feeling up for the spa. He wanted to just hang out by the beach and relax. Fine. No big deal. I figured that would mean Sarah and I could still have her spa day, and her mom could have her own suite. But then out of nowhere, Amy decides she wants to make a girls' day. She pulls Sarah aside and says, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if it was just us girls, you and me and Mom?" And then she actually has the nerve to look at me and go, "You could stay back and keep Dad company. He'd probably enjoy it." At this point, I was just staring at her thinking, is this woman serious? She actually expected me to skip out on the spa day that I booked and paid for, so she could have a little girl's bonding time. And the worst part, Sarah didn't want to make a fuss, so she just went along with it. I was fuming, but managed to keep it fine, I thought. If that's what they want, I'll sit this one out. I ended up hanging out with Sarah's dad, which was honestly the best part of the trip so far. We had a good chat, and he gave me some nice advice about life, shared a few stories about his younger days, and it helped calm me down a bit. But while I'm sitting there, I can't help but stew over the whole situation. I kept thinking about how Amy was treating me like an extra in my own life, and all the little digs and exclusions were just building up in my mind. I realized I'd been bending over backward to make this trip perfect for everyone. And here I was being told to sit this one out by the very person I was trying to include. That night, after Sarah's dad went to his room to rest, I sat down with Sarah and tried to explain just how much it was getting to me. I told her that Amy was crossing lines that didn't make sense, and that if it continued, I didn't know how much longer I could just sit there and take it. I could see she was torn. On one hand, she got that I was hurt, but on the other, she still thought maybe Amy wasn't doing it on purpose. She probably just wants some family time, she kept saying, but I wasn't buying it. You don't accidentally exclude someone like that over and over. So I made up my mind right then and there. I was done playing a nice guy. If Amy wanted to act like I didn't exist on this trip, then fine. I'd start treating her like a guest who just happened to be along for the ride. I wasn't going to go out of my way to make her life difficult. But I also wasn't about to keep covering for her or playing into her little family vacation fantasy. The idea hit me the next morning. See, I'd paid for the entire trip up front. Rooms, flights, spa treatments, the works. But luckily, the hotel had a policy where room charges for extras like food, drinks, and activities could be billed separately. I've been covering everything, including all the little extras Amy had been ordering. And trust me, she'd been racking it up. Room service, extra cocktails by the pool, some fancy dessert orders, you name it. So I go down to the hotel reception and talk to the front desk manager, asking if they can split the bill by room. They didn't ask any questions. I just told them it was for expense tracking, and they were happy to oblige. I had them forward all the charges for Amy's room directly to her. I wasn't about to make a scene, but this was my way of saying, "You want to treat me like an outsider? Cool. Now you can handle your own expenses." I didn't tell Sarah about the plan, figuring I'd let things unfold on their own. Part of me felt a little guilty because, yeah, it was a bit of a petty move. But at the same time, I felt like Amy needed a reality check. She'd been acting like this was her trip, her little family reunion, and I was just a bystander. Well, now she could start acting like a responsible adult and pay for herself. As we packed up for the day's activities, I felt this weird sense of calm come over me. Like for the first time on this trip, I wasn't stressing over being sidelined or ignored. I had my plan in place, and I knew that in a few days, when it came time to check out, Amy was going to be in for a surprise. I figured I'd let the whole thing play out and wouldn't interfere unless absolutely necessary. But deep down, I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she found out that this little family vacation wasn't going to be an all-expenses-paid joyride after all. All right, so the last day of the trip finally rolls around, and by this point, I've had it with Amy's games. I kept my cool, played nice, took all the pictures, and let her run the show while I sat back, holding my tongue. But that morning, I knew it was time for my plan to kick in. We were supposed to check out of the hotel, and I was ready for the showdown at the front desk. Now, I'd already squared things with the hotel, making sure they were ready to split the bills when we checked out. I covered Sarah's and her parents' rooms, so they'd be good to go without any fuss. But all those room service orders, spa treatments, and poolside snacks Amy had been racking up, those are going to be waiting on her tab. So I casually mentioned to Sarah that she and her parents could go ahead to the airport, and I'd take care of things with Amy since I had a few things to settle at the front desk. She seemed a little confused, but at that point, I was done explaining. I just told her it'd be easier if they headed off first, and she didn't push back. After they left, I head over to the front desk to finalize the bills, and just as I'm wrapping up, Amy comes strolling down, suitcase in hand, probably expecting I'd be there to whisk her off to the airport without a care in the world. The front desk manager hands her the bill, and man, you should have seen her face. The look of shock, the confusion, the realization, all of it hit her in waves. She glances at the paper, then looks up at me, baffled. "Wait, you're not covering this?" she asks, her voice practically dripping with disbelief. I just gave her a calm look and said, "Oh, I've covered my family's bill. You're good for yours." She's still standing there, staring at the bill like she's seeing numbers for the first time. She tries to laugh it off, says something like, "Well, I didn't know we were splitting things like this." I keep my cool and tell her I thought it was only fair, given how she's been acting. That's when the panic starts setting in, because I guess she hadn't exactly budgeted for an all-inclusive vacation in Cabo. So she pulls out her credit card and hands it to the front desk guy, trying to look calm, like she's got this covered, and then declined. Her face went from a little worried to full-on panicked. She starts scrambling, trying to figure out what to do, muttering about her bank, checking her phone, probably hoping it's some mistake. Meanwhile, I'm just standing off to the side, casually checking my watch, waiting for this whole scene to play out. At this point, she's practically begging me with her eyes, hoping I'll jump in and save her. But honestly, I didn't feel bad at all. I'd been on the sidelines of this trip, treated like some outsider, and now she was dealing with the consequences. I mean, it wasn't like I'd thrown this bill on her out of nowhere. She'd been ordering all this stuff without a second thought. And if she couldn't cover her own expenses, well, that was her problem now. Finally, she calls her husband, and you could hear the frustration on the other end, even from a few feet away. He wasn't thrilled about wiring money to bail her out. And I can't blame the guy. The bill was hefty. Let's just say her spa treatments and room service binges had added up fast. After a lot of back and forth, she managed to get the money transferred, but not before the hotel staff and a few other guests caught on to her little predicament. Watching her deal with that, it was the cherry on top of this trip. She got some not-so-friendly looks from people around the lobby, and I just sat back, quietly enjoying the whole scene. I was almost ready to step in and pay for it if she came over and genuinely apologized. But nope, not a single sorry or acknowledgement of how she treated me. So she finally settles the bill, and I thought that was the end of it. But here's where it gets even better. I hadn't done her flight check-in either. So when we get to the airport, she realizes she's not checked in and has to deal with all that last-minute hassle while Sarah and I were all set. We went straight to the gate while she had to wait in line, looking frazzled and rushed, dealing with all that last-minute stress. And as if that wasn't enough, I'd upgraded our seats to business class for the flight back. So when we got on the plane, Sarah and I settled into our big, comfy seats, stretched out with our extra legroom, while Amy had to squeeze into a middle seat in the economy. I know it sounds petty, but after everything she'd pulled, it felt good to finally get a little payback. She walked past us, shot me this look like she couldn't believe I'd abandoned her, but I just smiled and went back to my seat. The best part? Sarah was finally on my side. After seeing the whole scene with the bill at the hotel and the airport chaos, she got it. She saw what I've been putting up with the entire trip. Amy might have tried to paint me as the villain here, but Sarah knew the truth. When we landed, Amy was still fuming. And the second she saw her parents, she launched into this whole speech about how I'd humiliated her, left her stranded with a huge bill, and didn't help her at the airport. She made such a big scene right there in front of everyone that her dad started to get stressed, and it even got her mom's attention. But her mom shut her down, saying she'd noticed how Amy had been treating me, pushing me out of everything. Amy was stunned, and it was probably the first time anyone had actually called her out. In the end, her dad just sighed, asked me to get him out of there, and we left Amy at the airport, still fuming and figuring out her own way home. Once we got back home, I figured that was the end of the Cabo trip drama. I mean, Amy got a pretty clear message, right? She treated me like an outsider. I made her pay her own bill, and we'd all move on. Or so I thought. Turns out, Amy wasn't about to just let it go quietly. The second we're back, Amy's calling up Sarah's parents, telling them how awful I'd been and how I left her stranded with a huge bill, acting like I'd somehow wronged her. I guess she conveniently left out all the parts where she ignored me or made it a point to exclude me from just about everything. But even her parents were on my side. They'd seen how she'd treated me. So when Amy started her little pity party, her mom actually told her to stop complaining. But Amy wasn't done. She spun the whole story to her husband, saying I'd used money to control her and that I was this big, bad guy who humiliated her. Now her husband's, but apparently he wasn't thrilled about bailing her out either. The guy didn't even come to Thanksgiving because of all this drama, saying he didn't want to share a table with me. Thanksgiving is always a big deal in Sarah's family, especially this year, with her dad's health on everyone's mind. Sarah's mom really wanted everyone together, and it was important for her to have the family around. But Amy and her husband both skipped it because of me. I was half tempted to skip it myself, just to avoid any more issues. But Sarah's dad personally asked me to come. I wasn't about to turn him down, so I showed up, figuring I'd just keep things civil and low-key. When I got there, everything seemed all right. It was only later in the evening that Sarah's mom pulled me aside and told me what had really been going on. Apparently, Amy's husband was done with her drama. He'd had enough of the vacation from hell, as he put it, and had started putting his foot down. Amy had been demanding more and more from him, pushing him to take on another job so she could keep up with the lifestyle she thought she deserved after her taste of Cabo. He told Sarah's mom that if he was going to work extra hours, he wasn't going to be picking up all the household chores, too. Amy, of course, didn't like that idea at all. The way her mom told it, things had gotten so bad that she'd even threatened to leave him if he didn't start providing more. Sarah's mom said that, at one point, she told Amy that if she ever went through with a divorce, she'd be on her own financially because they weren't going to enable her anymore. I have to admit, hearing that made me feel a bit better about everything. It was like I wasn't the only one who'd finally had enough of her entitled attitude. Thanksgiving dinner itself went off without a hitch, mostly because Amy and her husband weren't there. Her parents seemed relaxed, and Sarah and I finally had some peace without all the sideline drama. Her dad even took a minute to tell me how grateful he was for everything I'd done for him on the trip. That little moment made the whole mess almost worth it. After dinner, once her dad went to bed, Sarah's mom and I sat down with Sarah, and the conversation circled back to Cabo. Sarah admitted that, in hindsight, maybe letting Amy tag along wasn't the best idea, especially with how things turned out. I could tell Sarah felt a little guilty for not stepping in sooner, but her mom reassured her, saying that she'd had no idea Amy was going to act the way she did either. And that's when Sarah's mom dropped another little surprise. Apparently, Amy's been working a part-time job, barely putting in 20 hours a week, while her husband works full-time, and then some. She's been expecting him to take care of everything, while she lounges around and needs time for herself. Her husband was already close to his breaking point before the trip, and Cabo had just made things worse. I had no clue she was living like that, but it really explained a lot of her entitlement. In the end, Sarah's mom and dad were fully backing me. Her mom even said that after watching everything play out, they felt I'd done the right thing by making her pay her own way. Apparently, her dad had pulled Sarah's mom aside after the trip and told her he'd seen how Amy was treating me, and he'd had enough of her behavior too. Hearing that was a bit of a relief, honestly. It was good to know that I wasn't the only one who thought Amy had gone too far. After Thanksgiving, things started to quiet down again. But every now and then, Sarah would get a text from Amy, trying to play the victim or make some snide comment about how I used money to make her feel small. I never responded, and eventually she stopped. But every now and then, word would get back to us through Sarah's mom that Amy was still dealing with fallout from the trip. Her husband had apparently doubled down on the whole "you're paying me back" deal and wasn't budging. I guess Cabo gave Amy a wake-up call she didn't see coming. Sarah's mom even joked with me later, saying, once you get a taste of a 5-star resort, it's hard to go back. And it seemed like that was true for Amy. She'd gotten a glimpse of the good life and decided she deserved it, without actually working for it. And now? Well, now she was feeling the sting of her own actions. Looking back, do I regret leaving her with that bill? Not a chance. Maybe it was a tough lesson, but she needed it. I think she assumed she could treat me however she wanted, and I'd just roll over. But I'm not about to bankroll someone who treats me like an afterthought on a trip I put together. So that's it. Family vacations are supposed to bring everyone closer, right? Guess that wasn't in the cards for us. But I'm okay with it, and Sarah is too. If anything, the trip showed us exactly who Amy is. And maybe, just maybe, it gave her a little reality check.